All right. Are we live? Are we
We
live?
are live. We're live.
Okay, that's fine. We'll cut that in post. All right.
Good
Um,
idea.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Elijah Gizzarelli, aka Coach Eli, here with Dancing Dragons Live. Dancing Dragons Live is Dancing Dragons weekly video podcast, weekly call-in show. Though we don't take call-ins yet. Eventually, when we get enough audience members, we will. Right now, we're doing panels every single week where you get real information from real coaches about real life situations. This week, we have a special guest with us, Mr. Michael Springman. Now, Will is going to be giving him a full introduction in a minute, but like and subscribe. At the bottom here in the description, you can go to dancingdragons.cc and you can look up like all the different coaches that we have and see if getting a life coach is what you need in your life. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Will to introduce our special guest.
Yeah, welcome, guys. And like you said, like, share, and subscribe. Find dancingdragons.cc. That's dancingdragons.cc, dancingdragons.cc. And like you said, we're joined by J. Michael Springham. I've interviewed this guy a bunch of times. We're going to have a slightly different conversation this time, so it's going to be really fun. But I'm going to read his Amazon bio. He's a lawyer, he's an author, and he's a diplomat. J. Michael Springman served in the United States government at the Commerce Department as a diplomat, with the State Department's Foreign Service, with postings in Germany, India, and Saudi Arabia. He left federal service and currently practices law in Washington, D.C. Springman has been published in numerous foreign policy publications, including Covert Action Quarterly. I'm a regular subscriber to that. They don't know that. Unclassified, Global Outlook, Global Research, The Public Record, Op-Ed News, and Foreign Policy Journal. He holds a JD from American University in Washington, D.C., as well as an undergraduate and graduate degrees in international relations from Georgetown University and the Catholic University of America. In 2004, the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee recognized Springman as one of its pro bono attorneys of the year. And like I said, this guy does it all. He's a fascinating person. And then we'll also talk about how he's an American hero. He's a hero of the world because he stood up for what's right. And we'll also be talking about his books, which you can find in the description of this video as well, too. But again, thanks for joining, Mr. Springman. And how's everything been going since we last chatted, brother?
Well, I'm happy to be here. It's always interesting and enjoyable to talk to you folks and the wider audience. And as far as everything's going, it's about the same. I've not won the lottery, and I've not found a marvelous woman to move in with me. But other than that, it's okay.
Well, that's one of the things, too, I wanted to talk to you about afterwards. Actually, we can just talk about it right now. I was thinking me and you, passports. Okay, just kidding. Maybe not kidding. All right, but so actually, let's first talk about your book. You've written a couple books. But let's talk briefly about your first book. Actually, you know what? Scrap that. Let's talk about what you did from. Let's go chronologically here. What did your parents do for a living?
Well, my father worked for the Bureau of Engraving and Printing as a masonry mechanic. It's cement laying, plastering, dealing with bricks and mortar and things like that. And my mother had been a registered nurse and eventually became a homemaker.
Pardon me. And at what age did you want to, get into diplomacy and represent your country? How young were you?
Well, I was in high school and I read Lederer and Burdick's book, The Ugly American, which talked essentially about most of the people in the Foreign Service, diplomats, really hadn't a clue as to what American interests were around the world and what the foreign countries' interests around the world were. So they were not simply able to come to a meeting of the minds or to recognize what their interests were and how to connect them up with American interests, or to at least avoid conflict.
And so I would garner an assumption that, what got you into that? Because most high schoolers, they're worried about cooties, pimples, and girls, right? And you're over here reading about diplomacy. When did your interest in that start?
Sometime in the middle of high school. I don't remember. The book was the kickoff. The book was an excellent description of a failed American government and a failed American foreign policy and a failed American State Department. And maybe I was overwhelmingly ambitious and consider myself a better than they were, I guess. So I figured, well, if they're that bad, I can at least do just as well, if not better.
And
I
so
like
you
that.
went, and so you went to college with that in mind.
That's right. I went to Georgetown University's Foreign Service School, which at that time was the only undergraduate degree in the country in foreign affairs.
Wow, that's actually interesting. The only in, and I'm wondering how many there are now. But yeah, I'm sure at that time that's pretty crazy that you have to go to Georgetown to kind of get that degree. So that should tell you the influence there. And when you were at Georgetown, did you have any mentors or classmates or people that kind of took you under the wing or you look for mentorship?
No, I didn't.
No. And what did your parents feel about you getting into this? Because I mean, it's pretty different from what they did.
Yeah, it was. They really didn't have any opinion one way or the other.
And so as far as, so you just kind of had a determination when you were in high school and you kind of just stuck after it. So when after you graduate, what's your first job?
Well, my first job was at the Commerce Department. Since I couldn't get into the State Department, I couldn't pass the oral exam. So I went to work for Commerce's, at the time it was Bureau of International Commerce, and later it became the International Trade Administration. And I worked on Taiwan and Hong Kong initially, and then moved on to trying to promote automotive parts and accessories around the world.
And so once you first get your feet into working, there for the government, what was that like? What was the most unexpected thing or the most surprising thing to you once you started working there?
Well, the Commerce Department was pretty bad. I had someone tell me that the personnel at the office, the personnel at Commerce, operated on the fang and claw method of civil service. They didn't like anybody who questioned, who thought that there were better ways of doing things, that they didn't like anybody who really wanted to know why the place didn't work so well. Commerce at that time really was badly managed, and they would have a reorganization of larger or smaller parts of the organization every couple of months, and it was basically a badly run organization. Good people can make a bad organization work, but bad people can destroy even a good organization. And they didn't really hire any talent at Commerce that I could see.
Yeah,
And
so that's
yeah.
let me jump on that, right? So I mean, I don't know you too well, Mr. Springen, but I get already, just based off of what I know from your biographical past and just kind of like talking with you a little bit, is that you kind of seem to be like a what would I say? Like you kind of like do things your own way. Like if you see something's bad, you're like, no, I don't like that. So now you're in this big organization. It's like an intimidating situation. You're at a governmental agency, right? And you're seeing like the gears are just not working, right? Like what's the emotional toll that takes on you? Like where was your head at? Were you already expecting that because you had read that book in the past, so you were prepared? Or was it kind of like a shock?
Well, Commerce was a shock. It was a place that was hidebound, bureaucratic, filled with people who were essentially time servers. And at one point, towards the end of my time in Commerce, there was a guy, Sam Spaulding, who was about ready to retire. And he used his knowledge of the system to circulate memos around the building, and nobody knew where they were coming from. And he would tell me about some of the things that he had done. He started asking questions about why there was a damp spot in the corner office of a Deputy Assistant Secretary of Commerce. And it turned out it was a guy who couldn't make it 2 doors or 3 doors down to the men's room. He would urinate in his trash can in the corner of his office.
Oh my gosh, are you serious?
I
That is
am. And
that is
they really wanted to know who did this, how they found it out, and so on. They could never track Sam down to save their souls.
That's funny. So now you find yourself in this situation, and it's like we invest so much of ourselves into our work life, especially like you came up with this idea that you wanted to get into government, at least diplomacy, in high school, right? And you work towards that in a very specific way, and you probably see this job as like a stepping stone to that career path. And now you find yourself in this situation where you're like, okay, this isn't ideal, right? So we'll just say that, right? So now, how do you cope with that, right? How did you go about coping with that kind of situation?
Well, I was frustrated, and I tried to spend as much time on hall patrol or taking long coffee breaks than anything else.
Okay.
I would go down to the basement where they had an aquarium at one point, and I would simply look at the fish and look at the people looking at the fish. And there was a guy working down there who saw a bunch of school kids and says, "Hey, kids, come over here. Look at the invisible fish in this tank here." And the kids said, "I don't see anything." And another one said, "Yes, he's right there. He's right over in the corner." And I thought that was a high point of my day.
Well, the reason why I asked that question is because I had a kind of a similar situation, right? Like, well, I was in the Army, right? And, like when I joined the Army, I wasn't exactly like this diehard, like I want to be an Army careerist and I want to retire from the Army. I wasn't like that at all, but I still held the organization to a certain level of esteem. And then when I go in, right, like I am like kind of taking it seriously up until a point until I realized that nobody else was, right? And so right, but like that was like an incredibly emotional experience. It was like kind of hard to cope with it because it's like you kind of get this kind of like shaking of the fabric of your reality where you're like, oh, okay, so this isn't as legitimate. And it's like there's like a thing about it where it's like your own pride. So I had to do things like that. So I'll give you an example about a problem I came across in the Army. So I was at the Defense Language Institute in Monterey, California. It's in Monterey, California. It's a beautiful place right on the beach. Used to be able to run on the beach every day. Really great, right? And so in between language classes, like if you're changing language classes or you're waiting for your language class to start, right? Because these are big classes. Some of them take 64 weeks, right? They're really long classes. Sometimes you wait a couple of months for your class to start. And so they call that being like a holdover, right? Or a hold under. I forget the exact. There's holdovers and hold unders. I think one's like before the class. I think they're called hold unders, right? And so what happens is that you go to this holdover unit, and what your job is to basically do like stupid stuff around the base, right? Most people are supposed to pick up trash. That's basically what you do, right? You're just an Army grunt. I was at E1, right? So, the lowest rank you can be in the military, and it's my job to like pick up trash, right? And so you go there and then like you're and you can see a lot of trash is around the base. Right. And I would always say like, hey, we have holdovers. Why is there so much trash here? Like I'm like at the store here and there's trash everywhere. And so then I go to this hold under unit and it's my job to go clean up trash. But the person who's in charge of us cleaning up trash says, okay, everybody go back to your barracks room and disappear for the rest of the day. I was like, oh, well, that's why there's trash everywhere, right? Like, and so I like for a few weeks I'm in this unit and I'm getting frustrated. I'm like, are we never going to pick up trash? Like at first I thought, okay, it's just this a day. And then I was like, no, but it's just every day. That's what they say. So I was like, okay, this is stupid. So I start getting in the ears of the organizers. And even though I'm like a low rank, I'm like, you should put me in charge of the trash pickup because I was really going to make people pick up trash, right? Like, this is my thing. And I finally got it, right? I got them to put me in charge, even though I was like a lower rank than everybody. They were like, oh, okay, Private Gizzarelli is going to run this because he wants to run it. Okay, right? So, like the first day, like we're going around, we're picking up tons of trash, right? And then we all stopped to get like coffees at the coffee shop, and we're like walking around with coffees in our hand, drinking, actually cleaning up trash though, right? I go back that day. The person that like gave me the job is like, hey, we got a big problem. I got several complaints. People called me up several times, said you guys were walking around with coffees. And I was like, whoa, like, yeah, we had coffees. And they're like, no coffees. You can't walk around with coffees. I was like, now in the Army, you're not allowed to walk around and eat, but like, it's like, you're not allowed to walk around holding a coffee and then stop and sit. Like, what's going on here? Right. So I was like, okay, fine, whatever. So we don't get coffee the next day. We're going around. We did have a pregnant woman with us. Right. And so we had to stop a few times for her to rest because she's a pregnant woman. Right. And because we're all supposed to be in a group, we can't just leave a couple of people to rest. We all have to like sit on the bleachers and rest for a few minutes. Right. And we're cleaning up garbage around the bleachers, by the way, while we're resting. Right. But like, you know, you can only do so much. So then I go back and I get another complaint and they're like, hey, we heard that you guys were sitting around resting. I'm like, yeah, we got a pregnant woman. What are we supposed to do? Like, you just said that we're not allowed to leave anybody solo. We're supposed to always be in a group. Like, you want me to work the pregnant woman to death? Like, what do you want, right? And then they were like, listen, Gizzarelli, we put you in charge because you said you could do this better, but we've got nothing but complaints since you were in charge. So if we get another complaint tomorrow, not only are you going to be removed, but you might face punishment. And so the next day I'm in charge and I go, everybody go to your barracks room, disappear. Right?
Wow.
So that's the Army for you. So like just by going down to like the aquarium, was that like building frustration? Was it like, how'd that feel when you're wasting time, when you probably have like a little bit higher standards for yourself?
Yeah, it was relaxing, but I thought, you know, that I was being paid to do a job, and they were doing an excellent effort at keeping me from doing what I was supposed to be doing. It got to the point where I would sit in the office and do crossword puzzles or read the newspaper or buy interesting books on international affairs to read.
Yeah, and you know, that just shows how crucial it is. I mean, it's unfortunate, right? First of all, like, it comes from in my opinion, it comes from the top down, and you're letting these people do this, and you know, and it's unfortunate because then you have real people that want to do good work, and they're discouraged by the whole thing, and nothing gets done. But you eventually leave there, and you wind up in the State Department. What's that like as a rookie in the State Department?
Well, it was interesting in a way, and then in a way it wasn't. They sent you to something called A100, which was basically telling you how the United States government worked. And I had been working for the government for a number of years before that, and essentially it was nothing new. But they had people who had worked for Internal Revenue, people who were political appointees from Capitol Hill. There were a couple of CIA people there, along with foreign husbands or foreign wives. And it was a lot of wiring diagrams of how the State Department and other agencies were organized. They did take us on a couple of trips that were interesting. But
Do you want to elaborate on those trips? Because I don't think I've heard about those.
Well, they were basically trips to government office buildings. So we went to Capitol Hill and talked to a couple of congressmen and their staffs, things like that. We had a tour of the Islamic Center downtown on Massachusetts Avenue, that kind of thing. But I figured, well, I'm being paid for this, and I'll sit back and enjoy it and talk to people and see what they're like and find out what their backgrounds are. So It was interesting, and the real kicker was at the end of the class, they were giving you your first assignments, and you bid on the assignments like they do in the Army, based on language skills, if any, personal interest, maybe some kind of background, whatever. And I had been in Germany previously with the State Commerce Exchange Program, where people from state who needed a Washington assignment would get a job at Commerce, and people at Commerce then were given positions in foreign service posts abroad. So I knew German and I knew Germany. And they said, well, don't sell your house quite yet, but it looks like we're going to send you to East Berlin, to the embassy there, when the German Democratic Republic, East Germany, still existed. And the next thing I knew, I'm at this A100 class, and they're handing out flags of the countries you're being assigned to, and they handed me Saudi Arabia. And I was kind of flabbergasted and couldn't quite figure what had happened. And I started asking questions, and they said, well, we wanted somebody who was a little bit older, who knew something about economic and commercial affairs. And Jeddah's a major trading hub. It's kind of the Manhattan of Saudi Arabia. So we thought you'd fit in there. And I never did get an explanation of, well, why Germany was set and then suddenly Germany was unset.
What do you think the motivation was for the switch there? And what do you think they were thinking in their minds at the time?
Well, I think they were had the idea that I was disposable, that my predecessor, they claimed, had a terrible problem. I had a 45-minute interview with the American ambassador at the time, Walter Cutler. And he spent all that time telling me about how Greta Holtz had created such problems for them. And she wouldn't give visas to people who were high-ranking Saudi women traveling to the States, and they couldn't go without their seamstresses and hairdressers and other factotums. And I think what they figured was, if I didn't get with the program and didn't do what they wanted me to do, which is essentially issue visas to unqualified people, they could dispose of me.
Yeah, so let's talk about that, and let's talk about your book a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, are they saying to you like, hey, we didn't even do much research on this guy. We figured he'll just go in there and rubber stamp whatever we want. Is that like a good summation of what you just said, or did I get that wrong?
I would say that. I mean, for the 45 minutes I was with Cutler, I kept wondering what was going on and why he was talking to me about this woman who sounded like she was going to make my career for me. When in actual fact, it was the other way around. They eventually kicked me out and promoted her to ambassador. The thing was that I think what Cutler was trying to do was to indirectly tell me not to make waves, not to raise questions, not to do anything other than stamp visas, and never question who you were stamping the visa for or why. And when I asked the desk officer who was there with us, this is a guy who works in Washington as kind of the host country's ambassador or embassy, where they interpret the Saudi government or what other government to the American government and vice versa. And I asked the guy, what was Cutler talking about? He says, well, I don't know. Cutler's just a queer duck. So it's
so you're there. I mean, you finally make it to the State Department. Mm-hmm. You think you're going one place, you end up going to another place, mm-hmm. and you're doing this for what would be perceived as altruistic reasons. And then you got the slime ball across from you on the desk saying, hey, look, buddy, here's how we do things over here. You do exactly whatever. What is going through your head when you're when this guy's sitting there and you're sitting across the desk? Like, what's going through your mind there, dude?
What is this guy trying to tell me? What don't I know that I should know?
And so I mean, think that's a perfect segue into your book. So let's talk about your book a little. Again, if you're just joining, like, share, and subscribe. We're joined by diplomat, lawyer, and author J. Michael Springman, a true global hero. He changed the course of human events. So check out his book; it's in the description, and also check out dancingdragons.cc, dancingdragons.cc, dancingdragons.cc. And yeah, please get this book. I mean, this is an underrated heater. I have it over here on my desk. I might have to put like my best of books over here to show them off. But I mean, and you're only going to get this type of analysis from somebody that's been through it like this guy. And it's just so cool to get an inner looking at like what happens at the State Department, what happens at the CIA, what's really going on with these foreign countries, and who's running the show. So it's fascinating. But yeah, if you want to detail some of the events that took you into eventually writing this book, your
Sure.
first book.
Well, I have been writing articles and getting them published here and there. I had done some public speaking. I was even on CNN at one point at a conference they were covering. But it started off with me. How did I get into the State Department? What was I doing there? Why did I want to get into? And I mentioned, as I noted earlier, Letter and Burdick's The Ugly American. And then I started analyzing what was going on in Jeddah, where they were working with the Saudi government in many ways to the detriment of the American citizen. They would didn't want to publicize, for example, a European but they had no idea what his nationality was. I had been taken to lunch by a couple of European diplomats, and they told me about how this guy worked for the Saudi government to put on parties. And they would give him a stash of money, and he would buy drugs and alcohol and dispense them at these parties he would throw at his house for 100 people or so maybe. And then he would give the names of his guests to the Saudi government, and every once in a while they would raid the place. And I was at a one of these pool parties that they had at the consulate, where you had drinking and dancing, and which you couldn't do outside because men and women didn't mix publicly, supposedly. So this guy was telling me about this. I brought the subject up, and he says, "Yeah, I was at one of those parties." And this guy was, I guess, maybe in his 50s at the time, and not in terribly good shape. He looked kind of flabby and overweight and underexercised. But he said, "I went out the back door, through the garden, and over the wall and back like a teenage athlete." But things got worse when they would tell me, "We know you have the final authority on issuing visas, but we really want to give a visa to this guy." And I'd look at the guy, and I couldn't see anything wrong with him, and I'd give him the visa. And then it got to, "You're going to do this, or you're going to get a bad efficiency report, and you won't have another future at the State Department." These were people that couldn't tell me why they were going to the United States, couldn't tell me what they were going to be doing once they got there, couldn't show me definitive reasons or examples or ties that would pull them back from the United States to either Saudi Arabia or their own country. And I wasn't until I was out of the State Department that I had talked to the journalist Joe Trento, who said, well, what they were doing was they were creating the Al-Qaeda, and they were recruiting at the time for the Mujahideen in Afghanistan to fight the Soviets. And they wanted visas for these people to come to the States for training, which was generally at military facilities on the East Coast. And then they would ship them back to kill Russians, blowing things up and shooting things down, hopefully with Russian or Soviet soldiers still inside. So I said, that's why they got so unhappy at me and why I kept asking questions. They didn't like this. But the book then goes on to my analysis of what they did with the Mujahideen, which became Al-Qaeda, which became ISIS or IS, or whatever organization they're calling it these days. It was basically the same crowd that we were fighting subsequently in various places, saying we have to fight Al-Qaeda, we have to bring them down. And I talked at the National Press Club to former Congressman, he's a senator from Alaska, Mike Gravel. And then also to Colonel, was it, I guess it's John or David Schaefer, I can't remember his first name now, about the same
Schaefer,
thing.
yeah.
And they said, yeah, that's right. These guys are the same ones we recruited, and now we're fighting them. And, talk about a government that doesn't know what it's doing or doesn't plan for the future.
Or
But the rest of the book is then devoted to how the United States did its damnedest to destroy Yugoslavia, Libya, um, Syria, and Iraq, and their various efforts at trying to get to Iran, which I fortunately had the opportunity of visiting twice. Additionally, I talked about the national security state and how it came to be in the Truman administration in the late 1940s, and how it operated and what it did and its budget and so forth. So it's a kind of a tour of the horizon of all the bad things about the United States foreign policy, which I think I note in the book. In the first half of the 20th century, it was a record of disaster, like the First World War and things like this, intervention in the Caribbean, Latin America. And then after the so-called professionalization of the Foreign Service and its merger with the CIA's clandestine service in the late 40s, American foreign policy then became a record of unmitigated disaster.
Okay.
yeah, and
There.
you know what? You know what's crazy too is that you ended up writing a book better than the original book, which more explosive, that which woke you up in high school. And I know these guys got a question, but I wanted to ask you one more question before I let these guys get at it. I mean, what was the fallout like from your book?
Well, it got me interviews on television all around the world. I was called by Italian television, radio and television, Italy, RAI. Got a call from a couple of German companies, I think, at one point. And then I started getting interviews from Press TV, the Iranian news service. Then I started getting picked up by various Russian news services for interviews, along with a couple of Arab services as well. So it kind of fed on each other. They liked the book, and they liked me talking about the book and my experiences in the State Department and what my analysis was of a particular given situation that was the current hot topic of the day. So in some ways, the book really catapulted me into more notoriety than I think I would have gotten. I was certainly frustrated prior to writing the book, and after the book, people picked up on it and began to like what I was saying.
And did you get any negative pushback from the boys here at home? Like, hey, Springman, cut that out, Bucko.
No,
Like,
not
no?
directly. No, I mean, granted, I had problems getting a job and getting clients for my law practice, but there's never been anything about like they told Philip Giraldi, you don't write anymore for strategic culture in Russia, or else. He had a letter from the Justice Department saying that. My closest brushes with any of this was I've had visits from the FBI on 2 occasions asking about my non-existent connections with Press TV. That's pretty much dried up. And I simply did what anybody smart would do and say, I'm not going to talk to you. Because what the FBI does is interview you for hour after hour after hour, saying, well, we just want to talk. We want to get some ideas from you and so on. And then after about the 3rd hour, they'll say, well, you said this at the 3rd hour. And in the 1st hour, when we asked you the same question, you had a different answer. That's lying to the government. We're going to arrest you. So smart people don't talk.
Yeah, they try to do the same thing to me. Hey, yeah, we just want you to come in and chat. You know what I'm saying? You're not in trouble or anything, Will. We just want you to come and chat and say the wrong thing so we can throw cuffs on you. It's not happening, bro. So it's unfortunate that you didn't have a mentor, and you know, I mean, he's been a great source of inspiration for me and a lead. But I mean, just can you imagine if we had better people at the State Department, in our government, and it wasn't just like this, the things that we could accomplish. I mean, the money that's thrown behind these things for guys to sit there, look at an aquarium, and then even worse, hey, you look like you're a pretty bad guy. You want a free pass to America? Hey, there you go, right? So it's crazy, man. And again, I appreciate you for what you did, man, and speaking out about that, because you know that's something that takes a large amount of confidence too. Because I mean, you studied this before, you know that, you know, some of the people in the intelligence agencies, they're not the best guys, and they don't have the best track record. So knowing this, you could literally be like, hey, something terrible could happen to me, but I'm still going to stand up and do the right thing. And I think that's a message we should all take, because just making a small little decision, right? If you keep bending and doing the wrong thing, it's those little small decisions that make you a good person. Elijah or Alex, I
I have
think
a
you want to say
question. I have a
something.
question. Yeah. So this is on topic, but a little bit out there. What's different between someone who gets hired at state versus someone who gets hired at CIA? Right. What's the personality profile? We've got coaches at Dancing Dragons. They vary in background and personality, almost by their coaching specialty. There's a lot of people that really have different backgrounds. Every coach is very different. It's really hard to paint them with a brush, tar them with a brush. But how would you characterize state hires versus CIA hires? Because the personality profiles to me are interesting.
Well, that's not an easy question to answer, since so much of the State Department is filled with intelligence officers from the CIA and
There's a lot of
other organizations.
Yeah.
I talked to a one-time station chief who told me it's roughly a third of the people who say they work for state don't. They work for us.
yeah.
And then I talked to a
Could be you for all I know,
Kelly,
right? You could have a long-term cover.
and asked him the same question. And he said, yeah, it's about a third work our spooks. And then there was an ambassador who ran a think tank on international affairs in D.C., whose name regrettably escapes me. He says, in some places it's 50% or more. And Jeddah was certainly like that. Out of some 20 Americans, there are only about 3 people I know for a certainty, including myself, who had no ties to the intelligence services. Might have missed a couple, maybe 6 total if you want to be generous. But by and large, the CIA people pretty much kept to themselves. They didn't associate with the real diplomats. They didn't go to their receptions. They all lived off of the compound, for example, in Jeddah. And whereas I was required to live on the compound. So it's, I don't know. The CIA people certainly had a lot of money. I didn't. I financed my receptions out of my own pocket, and it was money well spent, I think, because in one case in Jeddah, 2 guys came into my house one night. We were going out for dinner, and we had a few drinks beforehand, and one was a diplomat and one was a businessman. And they were telling me about how the Saudis were importing these Chinese intermediate range ballistic missiles called the Silkworm into the harbor. And they were moving all these containers around to block lines of sight so you couldn't see what they were doing. Well, I found out that the air attaché was down from Riyadh, and I called him up the next morning. And I said to him, well, are you down here for this? And he said, for God's sake, no, tell me. And I went over essentially what I've just told you now. And he wired it up to Riyadh and got a satellite moved over to get some pictures. And then I had to fight even to get the report off to Washington, which eventually I was told went directly to the president. So
Yeah, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Stringman, but this is why you guys have to get this dude's book, because it's like a dude like you that's like a good person, but only like way smarter. Like I was cosplaying as a Ninja Turtle in high school. This guy was reading books about diplomacy. So he's like a good guy like me, but only a better guy and way smarter. And he's been there. Like he has seen all this stuff. It's incredible, his book. Definitely check it out in the comments. It really is, because it's like, you can't turn on the TV. You can't type that even into YouTube. Tell me about the interworkings of the United States government and the intelligence operations from a first-person point of view. You just can't get that anywhere else. So buy my boy's book right now and check out DancingDragons.cc. I wanted to ask you too. I know these guys got another question, but being a diplomat, there's a lot of different answers to this question. Everyone probably answer it differently. So it's a 2-parter. One, what does diplomacy? Oh my goodness, can you guys hear me?
Yeah,
we can hear you.
Okay,
You just disappeared.
All right. It's not letting me. Okay, cool. Weird.
You're back.
I was just about to ask a 2-part question. One was, what does diplomacy mean to you, right? And also, what are you doing this weekend? Do you want to use some diplomatic immunity with the boys? You know what I'm saying? No, but
Well,
seriously, yeah. What
as far as what diplomacy means, I've got a French friend in Brussels whose father had been in the Belgian diplomatic service, and she defined diplomacy as saying the nastiest possible things in the nicest possible way.
Nice.
And then when I was in New Delhi and went to the Australian High Commission, there, Australia's embassy to India, I went to the Henry Lawson Bar. And they had a sign in the bar that said, "Diplomacy is the art of letting the other fellow have your way." But if you want the real definition of what I consider diplomacy, it's something I found under my desk in Stuttgart the second time I was there. It was, I don't know where it came from, but it was under the glass top. And it said, "Diplomacy is the conduct of relations between states on the basis of tact and common sense," which I think is magnificent and which I don't see in American foreign policy at all.
We're going to take that 1 minute of the definition of diplomacy. We're going to turn that into a reel for Instagram and TikTok because that was
I
so
like
beautiful.
that was pretty solid. We might cut off that last one. That last one was kind of boring. Real definitions, that's no. So I actually really like those first two. Those first two were pretty funny, but there's a lot of wisdom behind them, right? So what was it? The first one was saying the nastiest possible thing in the nicest possible way.
Yeah.
And the second one was letting the other guy have your way, right? So
I love it.
fantastic. So I wonder, right? So you're a diplomat by trade, obviously a lawyer and an author as well, but like you're a diplomat by trade and training. So I would ask, do you ever use your diplomatic skills in your personal life? Do you use them as like life hacks? Do you approach things as a diplomat? You play 4D chess while everybody else is playing checkers? Like what's going on here?
No, I don't think so. I think what I try to do is essentially be as nice as possible to people and try and reason with them, try to come to some kind of compromise if possible. As long as they cooperate and do the same thing with me. When they get nasty and hostile, then I get nasty and hostile. And believe me, I can do anger and hostility really well.
Okay.
So when they're training you over at the State Department, do they give you any psychological hacks or tricks and say, hey, if this guy's being unruly, we'll just throw some water on his, like not like that, but I mean, like, were there any, did they give you any tricks of the trade?
No,
That's surprising.
Learning by doing and watching other people and learning from them. And I think that's good up to a point, but throw you in the cold end of the deep swimming pool and expect you to sink or swim without a life preserver and not knowing how to swim to begin with, that's difficult.
Yeah, so on that very topic, right? So obviously we're all not cool, smart diplomats like you. So how can people use what you've learned about diplomacy in their everyday lives, whether it be with their relationships with a maybe significant other or the family or at work? Is there any tips you got for folks on that?
Well, it's basically talk and try and say what you really think and feel rather than be passive aggressive and hide your viewpoint and expect somebody to read your mind. I think also the idea of Talleyrand at the Congress of Vienna in the early 19th century, his idea of successful diplomacy was an equality of dissatisfaction.
What do you mean by that?
Well, when everybody walks away from a conference or a negotiation and nobody is happy, that means that no one has put something over on the other person. Nobody has come out ahead at someone else's expense. You're basically equal, and you didn't get what you wanted, and the other guy didn't get everything of what he wanted.
So, Mr. Springman, I'm pretty sure that guy must have stole that line from George R.R. Martin, because they do use that in the last episode of Game of Thrones. If you are not aware, he says, Tyrion says, well, nobody's happy, so it must be a good compromise.
So on that topic too, right? What are your favorite pastimes? What's your favorite book of all time? What's your favorite movie? Your favorite album? I think on a previous episode he told me his favorite album was Wu-Tang Clan Enter the 36 Chambers, but it may have changed. So favorite book, favorite movie, favorite album.
Well, I don't really have any favorites. I have, as far as books go, I think I like Joe Trento's book, or a series of books he's written about the intelligence services. James Bamford's books about the intelligence services.
Mm-hmm.
And Mary's Mosaic by this guy, Janney, about the murder of John Kennedy's lover on the C&O Canal towpath.
Huh.
And how that expands into the CIA controlling legal issues, arresting people, making sure that somebody else is blamed for their murders, that kind of thing.
Yeah, hopefully I can bribe you to stay a little bit afterwards and teach Elijah how these intelligence agencies really work, because he's misinformed on that. But so what about your favorite album of all time?
No, not really. I like classical music. I like Beethoven. I like Bach. I don't have any favorites really.
Me, Beethoven is like, I like classical music, but I think Beethoven is like hardcore. Like Beethoven was like showing off. He was going dark, and like I don't know too much about classical music, but he was like the bad boy. He was like hardcore Wu-Tang of classical music. So yeah, I definitely love Beethoven. And I don't know much about classical music, but when someone's playing Beethoven, even to this day, it's like that. It's a beautiful thing about music is, even though this guy's been dead for 200 something years, that vibration lives on, and that's a vibration that is, just about him. So it's really cool. Like what you do really does echo in eternity. And I want to thank you for what you do, because it will echo in eternity. And so what's your favorite movie? And when Hollywood finally wises up and we can get a real timeline figured out of American history, and you're giving your actual due on the $20 bill, with the hat and the blunt, and backwards, what I'm saying, true American hero. We'll have like Ed Snowden, John Kiriakou on our money, and it'll be all gold based and crypto. Just kidding. But yeah, so favorite movie of all time. But when they finally eventually do a movie about you, who do you want to play you in real life?
Well, I don't know. His favorite movie. I mean, I grant you, I like the series of movies about the hobbits, J.R.R. Tolkien's books.
Lord of the Rings. Yeah.
But I also like the movie about Gary Webb, who wrote The
Messenger.
The movie was Kill the Messenger, and his book was I can't remember the title of the book now. I've got it. But that's the guy that killed himself by I think he shot himself in the head.
He unalived himself. He unalived himself by pow pow. But Gary Webb. What's the name of his book right here?
I think you remember that episode.
Dark. Yeah. Well, he wrote
Dark Alliance.
Dark Alliance. Yep. Really cool. Honestly, it's so funny because before people were saying, "Oh no, they don't do that," and then like I remember arguing with my father, who even knows about this stuff and the bad stuff that the government does, in 2013. I'm like, "Yo, the CIA is bringing this stuff in, bro." He's like, "No, they're not." And now it's like they got a freaking Hollywood movie about it, bro. Like, you got to believe me. I never got an apology, bro. That's unfortunate. But yeah, it's messed up. Like, but yeah. So okay, who would play J. Michael Springman in the Hollywood movie? Maybe Michael B. Jordan or Denzel. What are we thinking here?
I have no idea.
We'll have to think that over and get it for the next time. And then two, like, let me ask you two more questions, and then I'll let these guys have at it too. What's your proudest moment?
That's hard to say. I think a couple of times I beat the government in court for immigration clients. I had clients had done everything right. They paid all this money to the government in fees, and they paid attorneys' fees, and they wouldn't give them permanent residence, or they wouldn't give them citizenship, and where they're doing their best to get them out of the country. And I managed to get the government to back down a couple of times. I like that.
Yeah, I would say that's something to be pretty darn proud of. I mean, you're one of 3 people in the history of the country to beat the government in a lawsuit. So, I mean, that's pretty impressive. I mean, sure, there may be more than 3, but yeah, nobody beats the government in a lawsuit. That's pretty badass. And, throughout all this stuff, I mean, it seems like you were a bushy-tailed, bright-eyed kid and you wanted to make change. And you did what it was necessary to get into the positions to make those change. You ended up making a bigger change than I think you even thought that you could make. It wasn't in the way I don't think it wasn't in the way I thought you would think you would have made the change, but
Yeah.
you made such an incredible change. What inspired you then, and what continues to inspire you to this day?
Well, basically, I want to, I guess, act like the elephant's child and be satiably curious. And in some ways, what I'm doing when I'm writing for Substack and other places, I try to pull information together. I try to make some sense out of it, and I try to give a commentary on how good this is and how bad that is, and what we can possibly do to make a change. So in a way, I'm still doing what I used to do for the State Department: talk to people, analyze information, and put it together. My definition of a diplomat, I think, is someone who makes his living as a gossip columnist and writing a weekly report about it.
Yeah, it's actually true, but it's also, I mean, it's a lot more. There's a lot more at stake than just if Paris Hilton, breaks up with her ex-boyfriend. We've got nuclear war looming. So, do you guys have any questions for Mr. Springman here? And again, before you guys do, yeah, I was promoting his book. I really want you guys to check out his book. I mean, it's literally a first-person perspective, somebody that's way smarter, and he's also somebody that he's super smart, but he's not talking down to you, right? But he's not also talking above you either. It's at a level, like, the way he writes is really dope. It's easy to understand, but eloquent at the same time. And like I said, you're getting a first person's perspective, somebody that's way smarter than you, into the inner workings of geopolitics. So super cool. And then also his Substack, it'll be in the description right here. And you can keep up to date on all the things that are going on in the world. Sometimes when I'm not sure, like, about a situation, quite frankly, Elijah will tell you, I kind of stayed out of going through the news recently, right, for the last few months or so. And so I'm not abreast to a situation, but if I want to find out, what's going on, and I want a fresh perspective, not somebody that's wearing tons of makeup and has somebody's hand up their bottom and or reading off a teleprompter, I'm going to get it from somebody that I trust, J. Michael Springman. You guys have any questions for my boy?
I got questions, but
Awesome.
nothing. I can save them for a second. Elijah, go ahead, man.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you have a really compelling story here. I think it's pretty cool. I would definitely encourage everybody to check out your books. Do you have like a website or something that people can use to keep up with you, or just a Substack?
Well,
Matter of fact,
Substack is current. I mean, I have a website, www.michaelspringman.com, that has the books, Visas for Al Qaeda, and the book about the migrants into Europe, Goodbye Europe, Hello Chaos.
All right, so I guess my question is kind of a tough one. All right, so I don't want to spring it on you here, but so you and I have had like similar experiences as far as like going into like service with the government and being dispelled of any notions of propriety, right? We'll say, right? So if somebody's in a similar situation, it doesn't even have to be with the government. It could be like you think that working for Meta is going to be the greatest thing in the world, and then you get the job at Meta, and then you go and you're like, oh, this isn't what I thought it was going to be, or whatever it is. Anybody who's in that kind of situation where they're disillusioned at their chosen career field. And I've talked to a lot of people over the years, especially lawyers. Actually, lawyers are a big one, a big group of people who became lawyers, and then they're like, it's not what I thought it was going to be, and they totally changed career paths. They just like bought a restaurant or something. So So what advice would you give to somebody that's like in that situation, right? They're totally disillusioned with their career field, but they've worked so hard and they've bought in so much. They've invested so much of their time and money in getting a degree or certification for something. What advice would you give them?
Well, I guess my first bit of advice is be very careful if you're going to blow the whistle on something, because generally they will fire you and you're going to have trouble hiring an attorney with no money coming in. And the law is a profession, but it's also a business, and you need to pay for staff or equipment or membership in a bar association and malpractice insurance and so forth. So think carefully and document everything. Don't think that your memory is going to be perfect. You need to have sheets of paper, copies of emails, copies of documents. And if you can't stick it out any longer, find another place to look. When I was at the Commerce Department and really fed up, I was looking at going to law school, and then the State Department gave me an offer I couldn't refuse. But keep your options open. Look for something else that you can do that would make use of your talents and your abilities and your experience.
Just jump ship. That's the correct answer, I guess. I don't know. That's what I did. So that's what you did. So I mean, maybe that's the thing. All right, Alex,
Yeah,
you guys.
I just want to say before Alex goes, I mean, I think it's like it says a lot about you, right? Because I mean, think about all the people that stay with. I mean, how many times do you hear a police officer who was like, "All right, yeah, I swear to uphold the Constitution." Then he arrests people for the First Amendment, does arrest people for the Second Amendment, is trained to violate your Fourth Amendment, enforces the law on drugs, all these other things, right? And sometimes you're just going to be like, "Hey, man, I'm not going to give my energy to this," And it's especially cool if you do what Mr. Springman did and spoke out about it, so the world could know. So I mean, that's what we have to do. People aren't going to know about things. I mean, Mr. Springman could have just said, "Oh well, well, he first of all he could have said like, "Oh, there you go, Mister. Oh, anything you say. Oh, can you lace up your boots so I can lick them?" No, he didn't do that, right? First of all, he took his energy away from, but he exposed it to other people. And people, we're good people. Like most people, we're empathetic, right? When there's a hurricane in Haiti, people give money. When there's a hurricane in Texas, the Cajun army comes, the Cajun Navy comes, right? But people have to understand that there's a problem. And then I forget the name of the psychological effect, but it's like, oh, basically you see some woman out there getting hurt and everyone just onlooks because they think someone else is going to do it. You have to be the person to do something about it. People are counting on you. Don't think someone else is going to do it. And thanks to this guy's work, we now have information, and people have woken up to what's really going on. So thank you, Mr. Springman and Alex. My apologies.
Oh, all good. I got so many questions, but there's no one that sticks out. I guess I want to relate it to our organization, Dancing Dragons, right? It's very different than State Department or CIA. This is a private sector organization, but every organization has its own psychology and its own mission, its own bottom line, right? I think the money flow is ultimately kind of what dictates what happens, right? The flow of funds. There's no way you can operate without money, and it doesn't matter if you're government. Well, government can print money, but it's a different story in general, So in terms of organizational psychology, at Dancing Dragons, for our customers, clients, and coaches, we want to create incentives at Dancing Dragons, the right incentives, and also discourage the wrong incentives. Luckily for us, the system is naturally balanced, right? There's no, we don't anticipate any malincentives or misbehavior. It's hard to abuse the system we have because everyone's kind of independent. There's no everything's a contract, so it's contractors. But yeah, in terms of organizational psychology for a coaching business with maybe 10,000 customers and 1,000 coaches, what parallels would you draw between a private business like ours and a government agency and some of the work that you've done? Any advice for a startup or a company that wants to grow but doesn't want the organization to get co-opted? For example, like, I mean, frankly, I'm part of. We'd all love to talk about politics, and it would be really easy to take the show and have people co-opt the show and just use it for their own entertainment, and we could totally take the show. I mean, I'm half facetious but half serious. Like, we can take our own show and just make it entertaining, and it's really interesting to watch activists in organizations take organizations on their own ride, right? So we're we're neutral on politics. We want to remain that way. It's really much better to be objective and not have a ideological bent. And I think we're going to always remain politically neutral and politically objective, but we want to remain that way. And so I guess I'm formulating this question around stewarding a company like this and the organizational psychology of running every organization is the same, right? It doesn't matter if it's a big organization or small, 10 people or a million people, you have this group psychology. So my question is basically what advice, given your lifetime of experience in different organizations, what your advice would be for a startup and to becoming a mid-sized company?
Well, I would say it's making contacts. That's how I was successful at state.
That's an inborn benefit of this organization is we already have 200 people. We're going to get to 500, 1,000 people not too far in the distant future, and so we're going to have this snowball effect. Yeah. We also got to keep the bad actors out, like people that are not qualified, nepotism. That's a huge part of our challenge, is to make sure people don't just bring everyone that they want on, and learning to say no to people that like that. So we have to create those incentives. But yeah, in government, you have nepotism, you have, favoritism, things like that. We got to avoid those standard pitfalls.
By and large, I was successful at what I did because I could make contacts. I would give cocktail parties. I would go to organizational meetings. I would go to the American Businessmen of Jeddah or the American Businessmen of Stuttgart or whatever, and talk to people and know who you could get information from, of what specific information would be, depending on the person and their business and their background. So I could figure what was going on by talking to people and by reading magazines, reading local newspaper, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I want to end this on a phrase that the kids use called YOLO. Right now, there actually has been some compelling information done by two separate professors and researchers at the University of Virginia talking about reincarnation. So you may indeed live more than once. However, at this vessel we got right now, it's a YOLO, right? I only got this will one time that I know of right now. So why am I saying YOLO? One, because it makes me look cool and I'm trying to get my street cred up. But more importantly, as I say every week, if your tummy starts hurting, if you and your friends start drinking one night and he wants to box you and you get punched in the ribs, you're going to have to go to the ER, right? Or if you do something like me, let's say you start protesting people, and then they say, hey, you can't use that language, and then you get arrested, you have to call a lawyer. You only have one life, and with that one life, like I always say, there's master classes, Bill Clinton, Jerry Seinfeld. What we're offering here at dancingdragons.cc is an individual life coach. We have hundreds of life coaches already, tailor-made to what you want to accomplish. So you don't just have to listen to Bill Clinton say, and then me and Monica, you don't have to listen to Seinfeld say, what is the deal with airplane food? I mean, come on. No, it's tailored directly to you, and you don't have those annoying voices. So dancingdragons.cc, dancingdragons.cc, dancingdragon.cc. Check us out, man. Seriously, it's really cool. I mean, some of the people that we have already as life coaches are extremely smart, extremely cool. I've been interviewing people way better than me. And I mean, half of these interviews, I'm like, wow, I want to sign up for their courses myself because it's just a wealth of knowledge. Some of these people are professors. Some of these people are Navy SEALs. Some of these people are health and wellness coaches. Some of these people are executive coaches and know exactly what it takes to get you that next level. If you want to get that date, if you want to get that raise, if you want to have those better relationships, better health and wellness. So check out dancingdragons.cc. And again, I want to thank J. Michael Springman. You can find him at Michael Springman, that's 2Ns.com, michaelspringman.com, michaelspringman.com with 2Ns. You can find his book there, both of his books there, his story, and then also check out his Substacks. All of the links will be in the description. And man, I feel like every time I talk to this dude, I just want to keep talking and talking. I got crazier and crazier questions. So hopefully one day in the future we'll get Mr.
Yeah, we'll
Springman
do
to
another
come
one.
back
We
on.
got there's a follow up coming. Thank you, Will. Yeah, we will ask him a lot of questions. We're just getting to know him, and you're welcome to come on. We can talk DC politics, the Beltway, defense industry, and all this stuff. That's very interesting, and it's pertinent to the company because we Dancing Dragons could be doing business with government agencies. I don't anticipate DoD contracts anytime soon, but it's one of those things where we may be doing city, state, wellness coaching, things like that. It's not out of the question at all. In fact, it might be a good avenue or good channel for business to do government contracts. We've got to copycat some of the other players in the market, see what they've done. So we've got a lot of work to do here at the company to build up our customer base, and some of that may be government. So everything's connected. Organizational psychology is organizational psychology. So we'd like to learn from the best organizations and the worst, and not fall for the same traps, and learn from the mistakes of others. So yeah, thanks for bringing on your knowledge. There's a lot of untapped knowledge that we got to tap into. It's all
Yeah,
about asking the right
I'm
questions.
sorry.
No, keep going.
I think I actually found a new specialty for my coaching, and that's coaching disillusioned government employees.
That's cool. Actually, it's on
That's
our
a
radar.
huge market that I could corner, right? I could corner that market. That's huge.
That is a huge market for sure. Yeah.
Well,
That's
there's
like
no-
what 20 million people work for government, and so that gives me like 19 million customers. It's amazing.
One thing on that, we actually have. It's not just hypothetical. We were gonna do like a special workshop for people that got laid off, from Elon's Doge. The Doge program, I'm just guessing. It's a total guesstimation. I would say at least maybe half a million government employees. That might be a little high. Maybe less. 100,000 government employees probably lost their jobs.
Yeah, it's only like 2 million work for the federal government, but if you count state and local governments across the board, it's like
2
20 million.
million. Only
only
double
two.
the state. Only double the population of the entire state of Rhode Island. I mean,
Well,
But
I
let's not
just
jump-
had an example today of how the government doesn't work. 5 years ago, I had filed an asylum application for a client. For 5 years, the federal government did nothing. In the meantime, the client got married to an American citizen and got permanent residence, and will eventually be filing for citizenship. So I was called and asked, well, should I withdraw my asylum application since I'm now a permanent resident? And I said, well, yeah, you can do that now. And that was about 2 weeks ago. And today I got a notice saying that, yes, we've withdrawn your asylum application. We've canceled your application. So
Nice.
Yeah, and
years, they couldn't do their job. In 2 weeks, they could say, yeah, we'll take your asylum application away.
Yeah, of course. and that's the funny thing. My favorite quote on how the government works is, "What's the difference between the government and the mafia?" And the answer is the mafia actually turns a profit. So yeah, that's the big difference there. But yeah, I want to thank everybody for joining, especially Mr. J. Michael Springman for his time.
Thank
Again,
you.
guys, his books are in the description. It's Michael Springman 2Ns.com. Michael Springman 2Ns.com. Check it out, and also check out dancingdragons.cc. Check us out there. And again, next week we will be live again at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So make sure you like, share, and subscribe, and tune in next week.
Yep.
Thanks,
And
guys.
remember, be excellent to each other, everybody. Peace.
Yeah, always
Bye.
be excellent to each other. Thanks, Mr. Springman. See you next time.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, it was nice meeting you.
Yep.
Okay.
Audio.